Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, hold on, John. Hold on. Sorry, John.
Let me get started.
All right, thank you, Stephen. And once again, thank you, everybody, for joining us today. My name is John from CompTIA. I just want to give a couple of data points to you, no pun intended, I guess, on that. If you're here for CompTIA continuing education credits or continuing ed for other certs that you may hold, you'll need to scan your badge at the back of the room here. Unfortunately, thanks to AFCEA, you can't scan your badge till you've been here for a while. I think it'll start letting you scan your badge 3:30 or 4 o'clock. If you do scan your badge, you'll receive automatic CEU credits for your existing certifications. And if you have not registered for this event, if you just showed up and walked in, there are some QR codes and a QR code sign at the back that if you scan will enable you to get into the online Q&A, the chat, and also will take care of your registration for you if you haven't registered for the event and want to receive CEUs. So with that, I'm happy to introduce our session leader today, coming here from CompTIA. Please give it up for Dr. James Stanger.
Well, welcome, everybody. It's good to be here. Welcome, everybody online. Stephen, how you doing? Stephen gave me a thumbs up. Stephen Schneider's handling the online component. So welcome. I'm James Stanger, Chief Technology Evangelist for CompTIA. I've brought in, thanks to Tony Matthews, thanks to everybody, a fantastic panel, fantastic speaker. So we're going to be talking with Robin here shortly. He'll be joining in. But also want to start out by saying, anybody here ever seen The Lord of the Rings before? Right? I'm sure we all have. I actually got a chance to go to Wellington, New Zealand not too long ago. And that right there, you might take a look at it. That's where they put a prosthetic tree, and that's where Frodo was hiding from the evil Nazgul right there. So I just wanted to point that out because Frodo made a bad decision in the field, didn't he? Remember, he was told to stay on or off the road. Do you remember? Stay off the road, right? And he was on the road, and the Nazgul almost nabbed him. Today we're going to be talking about data fabrics. We're going to be talking about security. We're going to talk about data analytics and how that all adds up to making good decisions in the field. If war is 90% information, right? The rest of it 10% fighting. I've never been a fighter, so I wouldn't know the percentage. But if information is vital to what it means to be in the battlefield or whatever you are deployed in, it's very important that you understand what crunching data and turning it into actionable information is all about. That's what we'll be spending the next couple hours with, okay? The breakdown's going to be me talking for just a couple of minutes here, about 10 minutes. The good stuff with Robin, right? And then the great stuff with Robin and the panel. So folks, once again, if you here in person are looking to get to find out what people are saying online, you can download the QR code. That's what this is. That's what John was mentioning before. Additional things to think about are we're going to be so it's 2 CE credits, 1 per hour, 1 A+, 1 Data Plus. Those of you online, there's going to be a completion certificate that will show up at the end. Those of you in person, after the 2 hours, you can beep out. That's what I call it because it goes beep. There at the end if you're doing the CE credit thing. Stephen, what else anything I miss?
Nope.
We are going to be doing a raffle for two vouchers, certification vouchers. So make sure you register if you have not to join in for that. Vouchers, very cool things to have. They won't even give me any, just kidding. For those of you who are online, we have widgets that can help you control your session, maximize, minimize, go on mute, etc., or get into the chat window or ask questions. So please feel free to join in there. Today, folks, I'm James Stanger, Chief Technology Evangelist at CompTIA. I do a lot of travels because I work with IT professionals, with hiring managers. I help create a lot of our education programs and things like that. But most importantly, I talk to people in industry, or workers in the tech industry, when it comes to DoD workers, about what it means to be an IT pro. And that's not me hiding where Frodo was. That's actually me hiding somewhere in England. Who was it? Was it Sense and Sensibility? No, it was Pride and Prejudice, where Keira Knightley's standing on that cliff. Do you know what I'm talking about? Right? She knows what I'm talking about, with the wind blowing all romantic. Ah, he knows too. All right, good for you. I'm literally standing underneath where she was, right, in a little cave there. In my travels, I want you to know that I have represented CompTIA because we're an education company. If you've never heard of CompTIA, it's not CompTIA or CompTIA, it's CompTIA. We do work in the industry, and they tell us what to do. And they basically told us we need to properly upskill folks. So today's agenda, folks, if you see it there, what it means to create a data fabric, what these 5 data decrees are all about, and what that matters, why does it matter to you. Folks, if you have any questions, I've talked to a few people. If you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand, and I will ignore it completely. You know, raise your hand. We'll get a microphone over to you so the online folks can hear, and we'll be there. Then we'll be talking. Robin will have the vast majority of the time in the first hour, going over what you will learn in a Data Plus class. Then we have a panel about what it means to put data fabrics to work. So our presenters, this is where I'm going to ask the 3 of you to come up here real quick if you don't mind. I've got a screenshot here, but if you could come on up here. Sam is VP of Cyberspace Operations Training. Come on over here, Sam. I guess chivalry is dead. I'm introducing you first instead of Robin. Sam Blaney, VP of Operations Training. Here he is right there. Tell us just a second about yourself, and then I'll make you go sit down.
Just a second.
Yeah.
Oh, wait. Oh. No, I'm retired U.S. Army military. I was a Chief Warrant Officer 3 when I left 3 years ago, so love it. Keep it up, stay in, get your retirement, move on. Private sector is good. You'll like it. We'll do a lot of data, so this is a good place to be, and a lot of collection. I'm a cybersecurity operator still today, and I'm in the training field, of course, but still a practitioner at the same time, so that's what I do.
In a nutshell, Sam has done a really great job of discussing about how we as IT workers can no longer afford to just be plumbers. We have to know what we're plumbing, the water in the pipe. In other words, the data in the pipe. Next is the inimitable Nathan Stacy. How you doing, Nathan? Come on in here and tell us about yourself.
Yeah, nice to meet everybody. Nathan Stacy. My background, I spent 14 years over at the NSA. Now with Elastic, been with them for several years. Search is our product. But yeah, happy to talk data. It's the future. I mean, I think that's what we all think. But I think it's true.
You know, I was hoping to get a real big name. We had to settle for Nathan. I'm kidding. Nathan, tremendous background in information and data, and of course working for Elasticsearch. I've heard of that company before. They have something to do with data, right? Yeah. So great to have you here. And then of course, Robin. Robin, come on over here real quick and introduce yourself a bit. Robin is the co-founder of ThinkDataSolutions.
Hi, I'm Robin Hunt. Happy to be here. They're going to hear all about me in just a few minutes, so I'll just save online for that. How about that?
Sounds like
Yeah,
a plan.
but I'm a data geek, and I'm happy that every one of you are here today.
And Robin has not only a data geek, but she's written the book, literally. What we have at CompTIA, we're very much indebted for the Data Plus course for Robin creating that. So thank you very much. Based on, of course, what the subject matter experts create, because any certification we have is literally the distilled wisdom of thousands upon thousands of working IT professionals. So Robin, thank you very much. So folks, what is a data fabric? I should have some form of manipulative. A good teacher always has some sort of thing like that. And the manipulative I'm going to be is, I want you to take a look at a piece of clothing that you happen to be wearing. Just take a look at your arm or your lapel or what have you. Did you realize you are wearing a technology, right? Because the word tech has to do with the idea of weaving. Did you know that? Like textile, right? That's woven together like this shirt. Well, technology, IT, right, is all about weaving something. So this idea of a data fabric, it's obviously a metaphor. And this metaphor is something that I want to talk to you about with this little picture here. It happened to be where I was taking some personal time after I was in the UK. And I happened, in my walking along the Cornwall area, you ever heard of the Pirates of Penzance, right? I was walking along there in England, and I didn't quite realize this, but I stumbled upon in this museum here, which back, even after World War II, was really that building was the center of all of the networking connections for the entire British Empire at that point, right? So if you're talking about, transatlantic, transit cables, et cetera, like that, you're looking really at the mesh, as it were, or the data fabric that existed at least up until World War II. So this little village had all sorts of people militarily protecting it because it was the communication lines for all of the UK. I bring this example up because that was the data fabric of the time. Take a look here, and this is the definition I want to come up with about what a data fabric is supposed to be. An end-to-end integration and management solution consisting of an architecture, and by architecture we are talking about networking architecture. All of us, most of us have done that there. But the integration of software, but the ability to share data with many people. The idea is that increasingly to make decent, good, smart, or great decisions in the field, it's about creating that networking data fabric. As Robin will tell you in the next 45 minutes or so, it's all about how you can get that information, turn data, which is just random raw stuff that you may have stored, and actually tease out information out of it. And I use tease out as an example because Robin will say that data is kind of a living and breathing thing. This here happens to be a textile. I took a picture of a tea towel. If you've never heard of a tea towel before, if you go to England, they always want to sell you a tea towel of where you are. I just thought it was fun to give you a picture of this because it's literally a fabric. It's literally a data fabric, right? Because it shows the data communications lines. We have to make sure that we have a fabric that can ingest data and make it possible to communicate. That's the key. This is a quote here from Major Rob Collins. For those of you, I noticed you were taking pictures early on of slides. These slides will certainly be made available to you. Because I assume you're not taking pictures of, me. That would be bad. That would be silly. But I just wanted to emphasize the context of why Robin is going to be talking to you and what the panel will be discussing. I think we all know about the 7-layer OSIRM. Well, people will add on layers. Have you noticed that? Layer 8 being the individual, layer 9 being the organization. Some people will even say layer 10 is compliance and things like that. I would argue layer 11 has become another one of those layers of the OSIRM. This means that as we create the way to share information, and I can't help but think of one thing that Tony Matthews here brought up to me earlier this morning. He saw a demo of a ruggedized server that you could actually bring along with you. Because too many times when people talk about data fabrics, they tend to think, oh, it's all going to be in the cloud. Well, I think it's going to be, we know it's going to be not only in the cloud, but on-premise, also in data centers. It's going to be everywhere. And it's going to be your job to make sure that that information is, in fact, shareable and collected from diverse resources, but also made available to diverse resources, whether it be data lakes, okay, etc. It's not just going to be about zero trust necessarily, but I couldn't help but think of talking to Mr. Alfred over at West Point, and he was talking to me about how they're doing a lot of secure a lot of single sign-on SSO, a lot of data sharing using the cloud, but also using advanced techniques, zero trust techniques. These are basically what I would argue are a lot of the major elements of zero trust to make sure that not only can we take that information that Robin is going to show you how to create, but also that you can share it securely. It's important because we need to make great decisions quickly. It's important because we need to maintain a tactical edge at all times. We need to use new techniques and also to use the OODA loop, as it were, in a smart way. Kathleen Hicks issued the 5 Data Decrees. With CompTIA, the reason why we got into Data Plus and what Robin's going to be telling you about is ways in which we can properly govern, properly create, properly manage the creation of data. That's what those 5 decrees are all about. So to me, it's all about, really not about data. People will say that, data's the new oil, etc. Maybe if data's the new oil, I'm more interested in the gasoline or the refined oil, right? Turn it into perspex or into plastics or whatever that I use every day. It's Robin's job and your job eventually to understand what it means to not just use data. I don't care as much about data as I do about information. And I love this. I stole this. How instead of random data, which has less value, you actually find ways to organize it and present it and explain it with a story. That's very much part of what a good data fabric is going to do. So I'm going to turn the time now over to you, Robin, because you're going to learn about these kind of 5 elements. These happen to be the 5 elements of Data Plus, the 5 domains found in Data Plus. So Robin, you get to bring up your PowerPoint slide. Let me see if I can do that for you real quick. And away we go. Thank you so much.
Okay, before I get started, I'm Robin. I have dedicated the last 20 years of my career to teaching people about how to better leverage data. I absolutely love data, but it's a big word and it means a lot of different things, and depending on who you talk to, you will hear different answers across the board. So I'm going to be very practical. I'm going to talk about Data Plus. I'm going to talk about the domains, and I'll talk about the things that you're going to learn there. But before I do that, I have to get you into what I call a data state of mind. So I realize we're at the end of the day of a conference. You've probably consumed a ton of information already, but please just humor me and do this exercise along with me. I realized a long time ago that I see data different than other people. And I realized it wasn't data, I was just seeing the world differently. And I've learned how to teach people how to see it the way I see it. So I personally believe that data is actually literally everywhere. So if you've got a piece of paper, you've got a phone, I would just encourage you to take a couple little notes here with me. I want you to look at this screen. When I see this screen, I see tons of data. Lots of it. You may see crayons, because that's what's really there, the image of a crayon. So I want you to take just a moment and think about what data do you see when you focus on those crayons. Just a second. Some of you may be thinking, well, color. I see a color, and it's an attribute, right? There's blue and red and green. I see materials. What is the material inside that crayon? Who is the brand of that crayon? Who is that crayon meant for? What is the size of that crayon? What about the raw materials? Who shipped it? Where did they ship it? How long did it take to get there? How long did it sit? Where did they store it? Are you with me? You getting the idea? I'm crazy. I understand. This is how I make my living, so just bear with me. So now that you're in with me and you've kind of tapped into your data lens, I'm going to give you another image to look at, and I want you to think through the data points that you see. My brain explodes on an image like this. Yeah, anybody want to yell some out? I'm for it.
The location, you can see where it's at.
See location,
See what the people are doing, or
See
if they're
people.
going one way or they're going the other.
okay? Coordinates, okay? What else?
Even just the shadows let you know generally maybe what time it is, what direction there might be as well.
Time,
And it's raining, right?
weather, time of day, weather, season, location, geography. We haven't even started talking about the cars yet, right? So I don't know if you're pursuing data or you're trying to help people pursue data, but until we see data in everything we look at, we're never going to get where we need to be. And I know that this is a simple exercise. And when you drive home today, you're going to be mad at me at the way you see the traffic you're going to encounter. I've got one more image for you, and this one is just specifically for this event. I know some of you will appreciate it. I do have two brothers that were career Marines, and I did send this to my oldest brother. and say, please can I show this at a military event and not hurt anybody's feelings or make anyone mad. So if you get upset, I'm so sorry. What about this? Tons of data. Data, 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 everywhere. It's immense. So when we talk about the importance of things like data certification and data fabrics and whatever, insert whatever term you want to include, whatever catchphrase, at the end of the day, it ends up being data points that mean something somewhere to someone. And I do hope that if you pick up nothing else from everything I'm about to say next, that you'll remember doing this exercise and that you'll share it with other people. And you'll think about it the next time you encounter a spreadsheet or a search, because there's always more than just what you see. There's all of the data that surrounds it. How am I doing so far? Okay? This is the best I got. I hope it stays this good. We'll see. All right, so ThinkData, we are very excited to have been offered the opportunity to write the Data Plus official curriculum. But more importantly, I was excited because as a person who does data for a living and trains data for a living, I know that not having proper definitions of a skill set is challenging all of our organizations, private, corporate, government. I could care less. A data analyst here and a data analyst here could have vastly different skills, vastly different definitions, and we need a way to consolidate. And I feel like Data Plus really gave us an opportunity to say this is the core baseline of what a data analyst should have. Now, before I go any further on that, I want to tell you there is a step before data analysts, which is data workers. And I found that there are a lot more data workers than have been identified in your organizations. So for those of you who are in leadership positions, I would encourage you to look at your power users. If they're the person you go to for all the Excel tricks and they're able to produce all the Excel things, they are your first candidates. They're the first person who need this information to empower what they're going to do for you next. All right, so let me talk a little bit about Data Plus and the domains. So again, the content released in early 2022, obviously we were thrilled. I loved writing the book. I thought it was so fun. I actually purchased the book. It's funny, I didn't get one for writing it. I actually purchased the book so I could see what the digital version looked like in print, and it was amazing to open that up and look at it. So you do have all of the content I believe you need, and then some experience on top of it to be able to learn from the content and then go and test yourself on the exam. All right, so before we get into the actual domains, I thought this was really, really interesting. 90% of the world's data generated after 2014, and the volume doubles every year. And I would imagine that this probably is out of date. So when you hear people say, why do we hear so much about data and why is there such a push for data? This is because we are overwhelmed with the amount of data that is being processed and collected. 96% of organizations plan to hire people with data analytic skills. Okay, if we can narrow them down to determine what they need, yeah, we want to hire a lot of people with data skills. I said years ago that to me, all of our end users will be technical users. When I started my career, there was a very distinct difference between the technical people and the end user. Now we call them business users. Now our business users are using the same technologies and the same tech tools that we used to only have in the IT department. More people are data analysts than actually realize it. I know this to be a fact because they take my courses and they go, oh my God, I've been a data analyst my whole life and had no idea, because they had a different job title. And they may not have worked in the data analysis department. We can't do everything we need to do siloed in one department. It has to be across all units, all skills, not just siloed in a single department. to me, this is where the technical skills and the business skills merge together in the most beautiful way, and I hope they will continue to do so. You can be a business person and never have worked in IT. You can support technology and be in these technical tools with these technical skills, but you're not going to be that cookie cutter IT person that we're used to. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. It makes perfect sense to me because, I mean, I live it every single day. Okay, so Data Plus is actually an early career data analytics certification. It is meant to cover, like, if you're 18 to 24 months in, although I would say when you see the domains and you start consuming the information, it's probably going to impact you every day for the remainder of your career. And for those of you who have been in data for a really long time, you will probably know that you took years to gain all these skills that are consolidated in this one book. The domains cover concepts and environments, data mining, analysis, or what we like to call at ThinkData, the scary chapter, visualization, and governance. I'm a huge fan of data governance, and I'm also a big fan of saying just because you haven't documented your data governance plan doesn't mean that you don't have one. You just don't have it documented as happening, whether you have it under control or not. Okay, this visual representation on the right-hand side, this was developed by one of my teammates, Shannon, and I'm super proud to show this. This actually represents like the percentages of weight on the domain. So data concepts and environments is a smaller percentage, data governance is a smaller percentage, but the three in the middle represent the higher percentages of the knowledge that you need in the exam. All right, so let's talk about data concepts and environments. To me, these are no-brainers. What's the difference between a relational and a non-relational database? One has relationships, one doesn't. It's the way we store the data. Relationships are a huge concept for people, and joining data is a massive concept for people if they really want to pursue data analysis and create data sets. We talk about tables and primary keys, and one of the least favorite topics is normalization, but it's one of the most necessary topics to normalize data so you understand when you're working with a designed data set what you're actually looking at. Talk about the different data processing and storage systems, also how data changes, understanding the types of data, and then breaking down field data types. I don't know, if you're not experienced in data and you're like, I really want to take my data to the next step, you have to understand data types. Like, people want to start up here, they want to jump ahead, but if you don't understand it's a field, a value, and a data type, you're going nowhere fast. So think about what you just did with me in that exercise. You thought about different fields. You thought about different data points, and if you think about it, every one of them have a different data type. So, numbers, dates, text, geographic information, I mean, these are all data types. So if you're wondering where to start and you don't know what I'm talking about, start there. Talking about structured and unstructured data. There's so much unstructured data, unbelievable. Working with unstructured data, challenging. Guess what? Awesome. Just let's do it, right? Every time I see a capture, I'm thinking somebody's capturing data. So we know what that is when we look at it. Structured data, we're pretty familiar with structured data. How many of you have ever opened up a spreadsheet and it had field headings across the top and data underneath it? Or you've looked at a table in a database, I don't even care what the database is called, don't care what the technology is, it's structured, and it's structured in that way so that we can work with it. Not all data comes to us like that, right? It just doesn't happen. We have to get it into that process, which we'll talk about ETL and ELT inside the courseware. And then unfortunately, where most people have learned how to really be fantastic in data is the good old CSV, because if we couldn't tap the back end of it, we could at least export it out into CSV. So we do talk about working with different types of data, different file types, and how to work with it. I always tell my customers, I don't really care if I get into the back end and it's okay, let me go there, but if I can't, can we get it out? Because I knew if I could get it out, I could do wonders and magic with it. And then we talk about the different code languages used to like present data, like HTML to present it, XML to mark it up, and the different markup languages there. All right, let's move on to data mining. Again, just want to talk a little bit about data mining, although it is the majority of the job. You are going to be doing these things in everything until you've nailed it. And then if you're using the right tools, it will perform those steps for you over and over and over again. But until then, you get a new data set, you have got to work with it and prepare it for reporting. How we get that data? Is it coming through an API? Those sound so fancy. It's just a way for us to consume data out of the system, pull it, push it back in, right? Get our hands on it. Then there's public data. There's a ton of public data. There's public data like the census data is public data, but there's also data that's been made publicly available, and I think there's a big difference there. Like people use Kaggle as an example. I don't take any of that as the truth, right? I read the terms on everything you use before you present it as the absolute truth, especially when you're using those publicly available data sets. Also, a good starting point for you is learning how to profile data. Okay, I don't know how much of you or how many of you are actually working with data on a regular basis. I'm looking at different data sets all the time. And I know for me, I have built an approach so that I can educate myself about that data set as quickly as possible to know what I am to do next. So I don't know if you've thought about your approach to data, but when you receive a spreadsheet or when you get a new CSV or when you're looking at a database for the first time or you're looking at table, I don't care what it is, I want you to really think about what is your approach. And when you're building that approach, you're really actually profiling data. How many of you can build pivot tables? Okay, awesome. Everybody in this room, if you did not raise your hand, I'm not judging you, you should learn how to do a pivot table. They are fantastic. Pivot tables allow us to profile information pretty quickly, right? So I know for me, for years, I would consume a data set. I would check out what's the volume of this? How big is it? Is it broken? Is it okay? And then I would start to pivot it so I could understand, like, how many of this do I have? How many of that do I have? How many times did they miskey Alabama? Did you ever seen that? Data quality issues? Okay, your profiling will help present those data quality issues right at the top. How many of you use Excel and have never touched Power Query? Who uses Power Query? Okay, if I ever see you again, I want you to tell me, you know what? I now use Power Query. If your tool that you have access to today in your data career is Excel, guess what? That's the majority of the world, fine. And it's got this really beautiful component called Power Query that you could have used for the last 6 years. Not trying to hurt your feelings, okay? But it works as, I don't want to call it an ETL tool, but that's exactly what it does. It's extracting data, it allows you to transform it, and allows you to load it so that you can then work with it. So how many of you have ever written a macro to clean up data? You will never do it again if you adopt Power Query because it records everything you do while you do it. So we do talk about Power Query because it's an easy way for people to up their game with their data sets. And I don't know why we don't all know about it. How many of you use Power BI? All right, you know Power Query and Power BI? Same thing. It's just you can use it in Excel when you don't need the visualization component. Anyway, we'll talk more about that later. All right, in the mining, one thing I want to talk about, or we'll talk about in the book, is, invalid data. Invalid data. Sometimes data was valid at some point, but now it is no longer valid. I think we used an example of like a change in percentage, like you know, we have different tax rates and there's different percentages, right? And at one point it was hard coded, right? Because we didn't know how to create tables back then when we were developing systems. So we would hard code a value in there and it makes all of our data invalid. These are things as an analyst you want to check out. Also, null values seem so foreign to people. When they think about a null value, does everybody know what I mean by a null value? It's like empty. Okay, it's not empty. It's full of information. It means a million things. My first question is, why is it null? Is it null because someone failed to answer it? Is it null because that hasn't shipped yet? Is it null because it hasn't been delivered? Is it null because it's not met a certain process? So even little things like null values are present in this content, and I think everybody needs it. All right, and then obviously we recode variables and we derive variables of information. Again, you can read the content for that. And then we work with querying data. How many of you build queries? Okay, just a couple of you. I love a good query, but if you haven't understood anything I've said up to this point, you are not ready yet. But if you take this course content, again, there's tons of examples, tons of step-by-step exercises to support that learning, and then you will be ready to query. All right, do you write mathematical calculations? Anybody write math? Okay, usually we say math, people throw up and try to leave. It's usually like a reason people like don't do data. You do not have to be a wizard, a scientist, or a mathematician to be a great data analyst. 20 years ago, that may have been a different story. The tools are so powerful. They have so much built into them now. Some of us were doing this the hard way. Now I can appreciate these tools, and also you do have to have some understanding, but again, don't cancel yourself out over a math skill or a science skill or just a perception. I think data is really in everything and for everyone. And to the scary chapter. People read the objectives on this one and kind of panic a little bit, but there are a lot of math that you're already doing already. You know how to average something. You know how to sum things. If I gave you a list and said how many of those showed up, you would know how to do those. These are very practical things for a data analyst to do. You start getting into the different tests on data. I want you to understand, if you read the exam objectives and you freak out, stop freaking out. Your only need in that chapter to be successful at this point is to understand why we use those tests. We're testing to see if something is true or not. We're testing to see if it's true, and if it's true, is it significant? You talk to statisticians and you start talking significance, it's got a very powerful meaning. Something can be very, very true in a number, but not statistically significant. And that's the type of stuff we break down in the course. Okay, we're moving right along. I don't know how much time I've already spent, James. Keep me focused here. Okay. I love this one and hate this one all at the same time, because people often see this as the job, and they miss the fact that we spent 80% of the job doing the data mining, compiling and getting an accurate data set. They see the pretty visual that someone else created, and they forget those of us who built the data sets to make it possible. Okay, so if you're smiling and nodding at me, that may be your experience. However, it is so important to be able to visualize data. Could you imagine if I stood up here and gave you 1,000 rows or even 100 rows and said, okay, let me know what the total is. Here's 100 rows of data. I want you to process that and tell me the number. Wouldn't it be much better if I just showed you the number? That's visualization of data. It doesn't always mean a chart or graph. Sometimes it's just a number. Sometimes it's a pivot table. It's way more than just sometimes a pie chart, which for some reason people hate pie charts. I think when a pie chart is used effectively, it's good. Maybe it's the misuse of the pie chart. I don't know. I have several data friends that if you put a pie chart in their stuff, they are freaking out. So yes, just think about that. So here we talk about building basic visuals, again, advanced visuals. We talk about building maps and using visuals to tell a story. Like, use visuals to tell a story. If I sit up here and chart you to death, and you walk out and all you can remember is I showed you 100 charts, I have totally failed. But if you walk out and you can act and you know the decision to make, then I've nailed it. Does that make sense? And I think sometimes we get lost in the fancy marketing terms, but again, you're building visuals of data. That doesn't always mean a chart or graph. Sometimes it does. And then ultimately, if it doesn't come together to tell a story, it's done really nothing but you spent a lot of time building some pretty graphs. Good for you. Most important in here for me is the development of the business requirements. We do not like to develop business requirements, right? That's somebody's job is to develop business requirements, but as a data analyst, data worker, you had better develop your business requirements. And really, I just take you through every one of them. Like, who's getting this? Who's going to have access to this? Do they have the proper permissions? How often, this sounds so silly, but how often does this thing need to go out? Is it hand delivered, which unfortunately still happens? It's okay. Is it hand delivered? How often is it hand delivered? Who's going to walk that from there to there? How often is it refreshed? These are all important business requirements that have nothing to do with mining the data or visualizing the data, but delivering that data so that people can use it operationally and make decisions. I'm going to speak just briefly about dashboards because I should have bought stock in the word dashboard when I heard it for the first time. Okay? Dashboards, 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 dashboards. We need a dashboard. We have to have a dashboard. Where's our dashboard? We really need a dashboard for that. Have you seen so-and-so's dashboard for that? We need our own dashboard. Okay, and then I see these dashboards, I'm like, oh no. What? A dashboard is meant to show you information quickly. It isn't meant to be, let me show you what I can do on a dashboard. I'm so sorry. I'm not trying to hurt anybody's feelings. But I, as a leader of my own company, I need to come in. I don't have a lot of time. Yes, I know I can click this and it will filter, but I don't care. I want the answer. I need the answer so that I can move forward, do the proper action. Does that make sense? So when you get ready to develop your next dashboard, I'm going to encourage you to think about the one dashboard we all use, your car. Think about your car dashboard. You use it, you know, sometimes you ignore it when it's telling you to get gas, and then you pay for it later. It tells you how fast you're going. It gives you some general operational information about your vehicle so that you can operate it safely to get to where you're going. And if it's got a problem, it tells you. You don't have to guess. You can ignore it if you choose to, but it doesn't fail to show you when there's a problem. Does that make sense? So when you're asked to develop a dashboard, please keep those things in mind. And then I laughed when I wrote my notes for this session because I was like, understand deployment considerations. That means something totally different in the military capacity. This deployment means, like, how do we get it from being in our test environment to being in our production requirement? What are the permissions and things like that? So we uncover all of those different pieces. And then also, if you're going to work in data, at some point you are going to encounter actually working with what is one of the best building skills ever, ad hoc reports. Oh yeah, we need that. Hey, can you go pull that? Hey, I need something that shows me X, Y, or Z. It's not a already formalized report. It doesn't exist already, but because you're the guru, you've been voluntold. You get to build the ad hoc report. These ad hoc reports ultimately sometimes become actual real reports that get run on frequency and used all the time. So I know as a data worker, sometimes people get frustrated with all the ad hoc reports, but really they're a valuable opportunity for you to extend your skills. All right, one last topic and then we'll go on to the panel. Data governance. I don't know, what's the mood in the room when I talk about data governance?
We've got yays and nays.
Yeah, okay. Listen, I don't know if I have this actual example in the book, but this is my real life example. I worked in the nuclear industry. It was just a really amazing opportunity for me to work with the engineers that design the modifications to nuclear plants. And you definitely need to have a lot of process and procedure because you can't even change a screw in a nuclear plant without a documentation guide like this thick. So I learned a lot in there. But I also got my first introduction to data governance because they wanted me to build these reports and they wanted me to build them across the system. And so I had to go to my boss, who then went to his boss to get me access to the data. Fantastic. So then my boss's boss went to the bosses in IT and said, she needs access to this and this is why she needs access to it. And then sometime around 2 weeks later, the guy in the cube next to me, Scott, who I ate lunch with every day, was like, hey, I'm about to turn on your access. I'm like, you've been sitting beside me this whole time. I've been waiting for weeks to get access to this data. That was my introduction to the data governance plan. It is a process, it is a procedure, and I understand for most data workers, it can be frustrating. Okay, so let me give you a piece of advice. You need that process and procedure to protect you. Don't be giving me more access than I need. Don't take it and just give it to me. Take it through the chain of command. These things protect us as workers, and it also protects the quality of the data and the integrity of the data. I love data governance because it protects me. That's the only reason. Everything else, okay, I get it. It's hard. And for those of you in leadership positions where you are in part of the data governance plan, please just continue to push through it. It's tough. And then also make sure that everybody who works under you understands the data governance plan that's in place. If it's just a few people who know it, it's pointless. It needs to be documented, it needs to be shared, and then if you take this content and you consume it and you start having questions about your data governance plan, take those to your leaders. Just trust me. It will make all of the data in the organization better. Why? Because it ensures it's complete. It gives us accurate data. It gives us control. The security people are so happy when we control our data in that way. We're not just giving it carte blanche to whoever needs it. Sometimes I think people look at data governance as a way to hold data away from people, when really it's a way to safely give data to people. And it is a hallmark of quality and integrity in your data. And then also master data management. I'll just speak briefly on this and then I'll talk about the exam. Master data management is important whether you have a master data management tool or not. Okay? Do you ever look at a record in one place? You see data over here in one place, but then you go over here and it's a little bit different? And then you go over here and it's like, okay, well, everybody types the state different ways. Like they'll do a 2-letter abbreviation. And then some people will spell it out. And then some people will type the middle initial. Some people will spell out the entire middle name. These are data issues that can be controlled with master data management rules. You can set rules on your data. And then you can use tools for master data management that will take that data, recognize it from all of the different places, and give you a complete, accurate record of information, which people love to talk about the golden record. Single source of truth. That's what we're all going for, okay? But understand, it is a path to that. It doesn't just happen automatically. All right, awesome. And then the last chapter of the Data Plus is common data tools. Okay, I have seen so many data tools be created in the last 5-6 years, it is ridiculous. That is going to always be a moving target. But what I can tell you is if you know how to visualize in one tool, you know how to visualize in every tool. You just have to learn how that tool does it. If you know how to mine data in any tool, you know how to mine data in every tool. It's just you don't know how that tool actually does it. So don't let the list of tools and the ones you're supposed to learn and which ones should you learn hold you back. Just pick one. Pick one that you naturally take to and then just move forward with it. Okay. The Data Plus exam, if you choose to take it, is a 90-question exam. You have 90 minutes to take it. It is a 675 passing score. Data concepts and environments is 15% of the domain knowledge. Data mining is 25%. Data analysis is 23%. Data viz is 23%. And then data governance and the concepts behind it are 14%. All right. I think this is literally my last slide. Why training matters. I mean, I want you to get the certification because that's fun. Like you should want to have it too, is my hope. But when you have data training, it establishes a baseline in your organization. It says at least everybody knows this. And if we can get everybody to know this, then we can advance our data. We can advance our outcomes. I believe in establishing that baseline. I think that is so important. And then also just grows your team's ability to actually work with data. Like you want data, you want to be data informed. People say data driven all the time. That makes me sick. I like data informed. Yeah, of course we're data driven. Obviously we're data driven. If I look at my step counter and I haven't walked a bunch, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna make a data driven decision and I'm gonna stand up and walk around. That is different. We do it all the time, but just because you're making data-driven decisions does not mean you're making good ones. It doesn't mean you're making data-informed decisions. Anyway, don't let me go on that. We'll be here all day. Anyway, I do believe that Data Plus represents what I would consider the foundational elements for a data analyst, and I would strongly encourage you to just check it out. I am available for questions. I have cards back there. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm constantly talking about data and very grateful to CompTIA for working with those subject matter experts and establishing the guidelines for what we will now know represents the data analyst. So thank you very much. Hope I did okay. If you got questions, this is a good time to throw them out there.
See if I can get a microphone here. Hold on. Okay. Can I use this mic here, I hope? Yes. We have a question and a very loud mic. Here you go.
Hey.
Whoa. Hey.
Keep that away. You mentioned that the exam was 90 questions in 75 minutes or?
90 minutes.
90 minutes, okay.
Yes.
The question types, are they going to be where you have to type, I guess, a sim where you have to type in a query? Or?
Yeah, so it's a mix of those types of, so again, there's multiple choice, there's performance-based questions where I don't know how much I can say. I think that's probably about what I can say. But yes,
Okay.
It's a mix of questions. And I was real pleased. I mean, again, I think they're good quality questions that, I mean, I was happy to see them. I felt like if I pass this question, like I've got this skill, which I found important in an exam.
Okay, just one more question.
Okay.
Is it one you have to take it at a test center, or is it something you can do test remote?
You can do it either or. So if you like to remote test, I will say because they have proctors, right? You can't have speakers anywhere, and you have to like completely clear your area out. And for those of you who've never done that, just get your house clean because they're going to make you show it. Okay. Also, sometimes I encounter a lot of workers, right, and they haven't pursued certification in a long time, or they have never pursued certification. And that 90-minute time frame and 90 questions, all right, let's do some math here. 90 minutes, 90 questions, a minute per question. Okay, so you don't have time to waste. One of the best things you can do to prepare yourself for certification is practice that time frame. Like practice in that time frame. We make all of our boot campers do it because it's you're building that 90-minute time frame muscle, for lack of it, because there's a lot of pressure. I don't know. Test anxiety is a real thing for people, and you start looking at that clock and you hadn't thought about the 90 minutes, 90 questions, a minute per question, and you haven't like prepared yourself for that 90 minutes, it can be tough. So I would encourage you to take practice tests and stick within that 90-minute time frame. Yes.
Talking about the testing.
Oh, here comes the microphone.
What score did you get?
Oh my gosh, I can't remember. It was up there. Just glad.
So I just wanted to give my recommendation on testing. I go over the performance-based questions, answer what I can. If I can't answer it quickly or I'm second-guessing myself, I'll review it or I'll skip it. And then I'll try to run through the rest as reasonably fast as I can because, again, you don't want to second-guess yourself the entire time. And loop back to the ones that I wasn't able to get originally, but I'll still answer them even if I'm not sure. Speaking towards the performance-based questions.
Awesome. Okay, well, hopefully this has been, you had a question?
I think we have some online questions, right, Stephen?
Yes, so we do have an online question for you.
Okay.
About how long does the training take? And is training offered in person as well as online?
Okay, so obviously, if you're familiar with CompTIA and their products, there are multiple ways to consume and educate yourself. So the very first thing I would say is you have to determine yourself as a learner, how you learn best. So there are, for those of you who are book readers, there are the book materials. You can read the book. If you've got the experience, you can just kind of like, dive into the book and take the exam. If you don't have the experience and you need a little bit more support, you can take in-person training. Obviously, plug for ThinkData if you want to take training with us. We'd love to have you. But there are several opportunities for in-person training. And again, I say this every chance I get. The Cert Master Learn product that is purchased with the CompTIA materials is a way for you to practice labs without having the barrier of licensing. You can get that practical application when you maybe can't do that at work because of what your job is at the job. So you can also learn at your own pace using those Cert Master Learn products. So obviously there are boot camps where you can deep dive into it for a 5-day, 7-day period. I think it's really important you have to assess yourself as an adult learner and understand that every learning style is different and you have to figure out what's going to work best for you. And sometimes that takes a little bit of exploration. I do believe on CompTIA's site there are freely available samples that you can download and take a look at. I would encourage you to do that. I think you can even do a test run of Cert Master Learn. I would strongly encourage you to do that. And the other thing I would tell you is don't just stop. Like, you can't just stop. If I stopped at the beginning, I would not be standing here today. I was relentlessly pursuing what I felt like was going to help me advance in my career, and luckily for me, it just happened to be data. So stay encouraged, and just guess what? You're going to hit stuff you don't know. Okay? There's not a technical person in this world that I've ever encountered that hasn't hit an opportunity to Google things because we didn't know it. So there's a ton of information out there to support you in your efforts of learning. And then, of course, I'm here if you have questions for me. Okay, if there's no other questions, we can move on to the panel. I hope you enjoyed. Thanks for letting me talk about something I obviously love very much. Yeah, thank you.
Well, folks, what I want to do is do a quick discussion about what it means to take and govern the information that Robin has created. In other words, Robin's taught you a bit about the 5 domains that CompTIA has in Data Plus, but what does it mean to put those at work into a data fabric? So let me see if I can bring up these slides here, talk for just a couple of minutes here. I'm going to fast forward to them real quick. And then we will get on and do some really cool panelizing. Does that sound like a plan to everybody? So let me start here. All right. When it comes to best practices for putting together a data fabric, I couldn't help but think of some of the places I visited. You're looking at the original Tokyo Tower there. In the middle is a lighthouse in the middle of Oregon, and that other tower is a tower there, a tower in Wellington, New Zealand. The idea, these are things and sources of information. Yes, even the lighthouse, because the lighthouse provides information that there is a big rock, and you're gonna sink your ship on it. What are the ways in which organizations are expected to protect their data? And so the question becomes, well, there are a lot of different ways that you do it. Secure authentication, right? And I think we all do 2FA here, do we not? Okay. One of my favorite stories is my son got 2FA going on his phone, thinking that he could keep his dad away because I don't have his face, right? So guess what I did? Anybody want to shout out what I did to him? I waited till he fell asleep and I just held the phone up to his face, right? And then he got really clever and changed the password, and then I just took the phone away from him. Okay, 2FA. You're going to be doing all sorts of implementation of not just 2FA. And this is a picture my son, my oldest son, gave me a while back. He opened up a can, and guess what? He had to open it up again. There's two things there. You know, that happens. It's a mistake there, but somehow that just seems like a perfect example of two-factor authentication. That's not the only thing that you're going to have to do when it comes to protecting the data fabrics. Because once again, it's how can I take the information that Robin has created and create a federated network. They use that term a lot when they talk about data fabrics. And what does it mean to protect that federated network? 2FA is a major part of it. Zero Trust, as I mentioned, is obviously another one. When it comes to access management, you'll see this if you take a look at the Data Plus objectives, which I don't know if you knew this. How many of you knew this? You can freely download those. Did you know that? And I recommend you do that. Not only to get started in Data Plus, that's great, but that's distilled information from thousands of SMEs, like I mentioned earlier. It's a great way of knowing what's important and what's not important when it comes to knowing data. Monitoring, of course, is very important. I was talking recently to a gentleman in Europe about the importance of creating a data fabric, and his point was it's all about the applications. And I'm like, well, what do you mean applications? And he said, well, information is in the applications, so hackers are going to go after the applications. So finding ways to secure how those applications work is very important, to identify various changes. So logging, encryption, and you're looking at a simple screenshot of how I used, the cert util to get some hashes using things like SHA or what have you. Now, obviously, there are much more sophisticated uses of hashing, tripwire and things like that. But hackers are found today in the applications, as you mentioned, Robin, in the APIs, for example. And this is my idea of a simple API process. And I know that looks like an eye chart and things like that, but it really does show when your mobile phone goes up and accesses a cloud resource, it's doing it via an API. My favorite analogy, and anybody has a better one, I'm all ears, I'm willing to steal everything, as Robin will say. What is it, Robin? You use the term, people get worried about data and they self-cancel themselves. Well, I can't learn data, I'm just not good enough. Well, don't cancel yourself, right? You can do this. I stole an idea that an API is much like a waiter or a waitress or server, right? That person who they help you. Because if you go to a restaurant and then walk right into the kitchen and say, hey, I'd like a steak or something, what are they going to do? Well, get out of here. Who are you? I don't know. I don't recognize you. The server that you have is your API, right? Or if you go to a fast food restaurant, I guess the menu is the API, isn't it? But APIs have a tendency to be misused. They can be misfigured, weak encryption, weak authentication. As you make a data fabric, you're going to discover the importance of strengthening those things, upping the encryption level. If you're using AWS, for example, there's the key management service. These are just examples of technologies, as I've talked to people, that are very important to know and understand. When it comes to practical integrity, you're using encryption and key management, access control, and monitoring. Those seem to be the four elements that most people are talking about. See if I can go the right direction here. This one I think is a fun thing, and maybe Nathan, I don't know if you recognize this, but this was something that was written a few years ago. An NSA consultant put together, basically pointing out that through government-provided equipment, that the NSA could basically go in and remove the SSL and remove the encryption and read all of the traffic between the public internet and the Google Cloud. That's why there's that smiley face. That's the NSA going, hey, I'm able to go ahead and read that. The reason I bring this up isn't to give Nathan a bad time or the NSA or anybody a bad time, but the importance of understanding what it means to put together proper encryption at rest, in transit, and in use, because I think those are three separate concepts. Storage encryption, I think we get that down pretty well, and we're way beyond BitLocker at this point, okay? Data in transit becomes a big deal for a couple of reasons. One, you have to manage your encryption to work with various governments at times, also between various elements of whatever enterprise you're putting together, from the cloud, your data center, to on-prem. But in use becomes a big deal because it's in that point where, as that point is processing traffic, you end up with serious issues having to do with control. Monitoring is a big deal. This here is something called Security Onion. I'm curious if anybody's even ever heard of this. Because to me, Security Onion, yeah? Right? Very cool. What was that? This is where this Security Onion is headquartered. Security Onion, if you've heard of Kali Linux as the pen testing poster child Linux version, right? Security Onion, you could argue, is the blue team version. I bring this up because it's all about taking data, random data, and here's 15,533 packets. Anybody want to go look through 15,533 packets? No. And there are those packets there. Well, actually, what we can do is we can start creating really groovy, in this case, bar charts, not a pie chart, this bar chart, right?
And a donut up there.
There is a donut, okay, and here comes the pie chart, okay? So I guess your friends who ate pie charts just tuned out of this presentation. Sorry about that, guys. My point is that you could say, well, hey, Security Onion does that work for you automatically. Well, it ain't gonna do that. It really doesn't. You have, as a security professional, I'm just using this as an example of what it means to take that random data and drill down and actually do something with that data to show a story. In this case, I was showing a quick denial of service attack and showing where it started from. Okay? Yes, there's all sorts of spoofing involved, but you know, you can start to drill down and see what the fingerprint of that attack is if you can get past that random data and get into some information. So monitoring not only helps you control and make sure that your data stream, that your data fabric is working correctly, but also I just wanted to give an example of how you can normalize, mine, etc. data. All right, to sum up, and then we'll get into the panel. There's a fairly new kind of concept called cross-layer detection. People just call it XDR. Is the idea that you can gather information from all of the resources that are used. All of us get on WebEx or Zoom every day, don't we, right? Well, do you realize how many calls, whether it be API calls, data streams, are created just when one of us goes up and joins a session? Well, how do you reconstitute that? How can you tell what happened with that session? How can you tell what's going on? XDR can help you do that because it can take all of the endpoint, cloud, network, et cetera, information, put it into something called a data lake, and that's a real term, it's not my term. And the idea of making it so that it's ready to be searched and collected. And with XDR, that makes it possible to do that. You're going to find this technology in various kinds of zero trust, but various kinds of monitoring applications, whether it be for endpoints, email, cloud, network, and that question mark meaning for data as well. So I just wanted to give a quick overview, not only of the data, right, that Robin, thank you very much for that, but also a quick overview of many of the technologies that you're going to be engaging in as you enable a data fabric for your network. Well, now we've got the fun stuff. Come on up here, folks, and what I want you to do as as the three of you come on up here and have a seat here, I also want each of you to all stand up if you can, please, because I love to do a selfie at this point. If anybody has ever been to any of the events that I've been a part of, I tend to do a selfie. It's my way of getting you kind of refreshed a little bit. But if you could, all kind of come up here. If you're worried about COVID, that's fine. You can stay back. But I really would like it if you could all come up here. And let's do a selfie standing in front of the screen. Does that sound like a plan? So everybody come on up here if you don't mind. And stand facing me like this. Those of you online, you're not off the hook. Stephen, encourage everybody. So everybody stand right here. There you go. Keep up. Keep up. Everybody online, I want you to present your selfies. Okay? Come on in here, guys. Get out of here. Don't be shy. Come on in here. How do you doing, guys? You're good. Come on in here. You guys are a good-looking bunch. I like that. Okay, come on in here. You know, years ago, I broke my arm, and I was able to steal, with the help of a nurse. You guys got to scrunch in. I was able to scrunch in a bit more. I was able to steal, with the help of a nurse, some doctors, what are they called, scrubs? Does anybody give me a really cool uniform? Because I'm too old to enlist in the Army now. All right, folks, so here we are. If everybody can stand here, scrunch up a bit. I just want to make sure we get as many of you as possible. That's looking pretty good. All right, 1, 2, 3. Say CompTIA on 3. 1, 2, 3. CompTIA. Thank you very much, folks. Have a seat. It's been selfie time. I really appreciate it. All right, there you go. More games. Yes. The best way to get there was a. It's all right. The best way to get a hold. I just got a question, real quick. As the panel has a seat here, I just got a question about my blog. If you Google CompTIA James Stanger blog, you'll find it. You'll get it. So I'm going to go over here and see if I can find my questions that I left.
James, we don't have the speaker, your microphone as well.
Okay. And somebody stole the microphone. Did I see the microphone anywhere?
There you go.
Stephen has it.
Thanks, Steve. Stephen?
He
Stephen
yanked
is
it.
nothing but a culprit these days. Thank you, Stephen. Appreciate it. All right. Now, we've been talking about data fabrics, et cetera, and we have a panel of absolute experts here. Just once again, as an introduction, if you don't mind, Nathan, then Robin, et cetera. So Nathan, tell us about yourself.
First of all, I mean, Dr. Stanger and I'm Robin.
Oh, just call me
Call me
James,
Hunt.
man.
It's fine. It works.
Oh, did I call you Tim?
Nathan, you said Nathan.
I said Nathan? Okay, good. I've been trying to call you Tim. I don't know why. So, go ahead,
I'll go
Nathan.
by Tim, I guess.
No, you're
I
new.
mean, great job. I thought that was really interesting to me. So, Elastic, I mean, we're going to remove ourselves from the product, but in general, we're search for large data sets. A lot of use cases. I'll kind of talk through them during the panel. Some of the things that we see from a 10 terabyte to 10 petabyte type data sets,
Wow.
like large data sets in that sense. But yeah, that's Elastic. I've been in the big data world for a very long time with the NSA, and here seeing observability and security type use cases. I'll try and go through some of those use cases as well as we talk through today.
Thanks, Nathan. One thing I meant to mention when I was showing you that security onion instance where it's drilling down from the 15,000 packets, which next to 10 terabytes, that's not such a large data set, is it? But Elasticsearch absolutely made it possible for me to drill down in there. That's part of the security onion stack, as it were. So thank you very much. Appreciate it. Robin, we already know about you. What else can you add?
I think it's important to just highlight, I mean, again, I don't just teach data, didn't just form a company to teach data, but we're actually practitioners of data at we're not at, petabytes level.
Different use case.
Different use case. But yeah, just have loved having a career in data, outside of teaching it, being able to inform policy for education and in our state help children get access to free early childhood education just by taking care of the data in an appropriate way, and then lots of fun applications for it, use cases for different industry, because Data's in every industry, can't get away from it.
I'm glad you brought that up, data being everywhere, because too many people often are like, well, if I get a job in data, then I have to work for a tech company, which would be fine, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, that'd be fun. But there are so many, non-tech companies that absolutely need data. I'm glad you brought that up.
Absolutely.
And these are, by the way, all three, including Sam, working data professionals. So Sam, tell us about a bit more about yourself and By Light.
Sure. Just recently started with By Light. As I told you guys before, I retired active duty from the military. I was a Georgia National Guard AGR guy for my last 13 years. But since then, I've been in state government and then finance, where regulated data is a big thing. So data classification, data tagging, and protection of PII and PHI is huge, and then reporting properly, and that process taking the step to make it easier and automated, and so you don't miss a reporting date, because if you miss a reporting date in the financial institution of any kind of loss, whether it's a breach by malicious actors with the intent to do damage or harm to you, or whether it's just a casual mistake by one of your employees, we call that, right, loss of positive control, because you really weren't breached. It was just a governance that wasn't followed. So those are the things that I really got really good at, working with the legal team in the finance. But now that I'm here working with By Light and CompTIA, we're talking about education and content, and Data Plus being one of those, curating the content and helping people learn and upskilling everybody, I think, and then giving people the opportunity to play in a safe space in one of our products, CyberSense. We use Security Onion and several other data capture data points, so we can do analysis of indicators of compromise. That's a data point, right? Known indicators of compromise, and then to teach people how to baseline and look for differences in behavior heuristically. So that's how you can hunt for that zero day or the zero trust. Exactly right. So yeah, using our platform to be able to do that, and again, we use Security Onion, so we're familiar with Elastic and doing the data representation and Kibana and all that. So
See, what's so cool about being able to do this data analytics, because instead of relying on signature-based kinds of approaches, which have their place, but you're talking heuristically, in using heuristics, you're talking about finding the unknown.
right. Right.
So one of the first question that I'm supposed to ask the three of you is, have you noticed, everybody, we're hearing a lot about data suddenly. To me, people have been doing data for eons. I get it, but
Since the dawn of time, I guess.
since the dawn of time,
We're all collectors.
why has data analytics and information become such a big thing lately? And I think you touched on part of it, Sam, in mentioning things having to do with PII. Because I would argue, and here's a little answer for me, the democratization of data. It used to be that only certain orgs, and I mean huge governments or huge companies, could do data. Now everybody can, or they think they can anyway. What are you guys' thoughts? Who wants to take that rambling question?
I'll just give my brief thoughts on this.
Right.
For the first half of my career, all of the large organizations and even mid-sized organizations were trying to figure out how to just collect and store it, right? And
Right.
so their technical people dedicated their time to the collection and storage and building tools to capture it. And so after the first 10 years of my career, we kind of like nailed that down, right? We got tools in place, and then it became not just large organizations had the ability to use these tools. Mid-sized organizations could use them too. And so we've spent all this time building in technology, building tools for people to use. Now they've started using them. They now know how to secure them to a degree. There's always going to be just chasing that. So now that we have it all collected and we're capturing it in routine, daily, every minute, now it's like, all right, well, what's next? Now it's time to use it.
Usefulness.
So I believe it's because technology allowed us to collect and store it. Now it's time for us to look at that collection and storage and actually analyze it. And I think the stats are around, we analyze 20%.
Got a question over there.
Yeah.
20%. Did you say that? Oh, there's
There's
a
a question.
question. Let's see.
Sorry.
Here's a question from Michael.
I was just going to ask, I mean, how much do you think that the answer to your question revolves around just the basic concept of Moore's Law? We're at an inflection point where we have the
compute power.
computational power in a smartphone to
Oh, yeah.
do analysis on data sets that we couldn't have dreamed of in '95, let alone before that.
Yeah, that's it.
I got some stats on that in my head. So yeah, like knowing that question is gonna be asked, I don't memorize these numbers in my head, but it was in 2015 that like the computation of a mouse, one single laptop could do the computation of a mouse. And obviously it's apples to oranges, but just basically that's kind of the concept, right? And right about now, we're at about one laptop can do the computation of a single human. I mean, just think about that for a second. Like 20 years ago, I mean, one computer could be the computation of a human. In 2045, one single computer will be able to do the computation of all humans combined. And so to your point, it's because we can. Like 20 years ago, we couldn't. When you look at Google, we don't know exactly how much data they hold. They hold about 10,000 petabytes, roughly something around there, 10,000 petabytes. I'm sure 20 years ago, they were maybe around the 10, 100 petabyte world, and it just grew and grew and grew. And they figured out a way to do something with that data 20 years ago, and that's why they are just crushing the market. They've just done so much work. And that's a lot of data, but in the DoD, we focus on search, kind of like Google focuses on search, but in private data, like we know people who have 100 petabytes, which is 10,000 for Google, 100 for just a random part of DoD. Like think of this, there's so much data out there that we're finally able to have the computing power to be able to work with. We just couldn't have done that 20 years ago. And now that we do, we could say, oh, let's start bringing more of that data in. Totally agree.
Yeah, I would just, everybody's got it. When did the iPhone come out?
Was it 2007? Yeah.
Blows my mind.
I mean, you can pretty much track it from there. And it has a lot to do with compute power and then the advancements of the handheld device, right? And then applications on top of that. So every application is collecting on you as well.
Well, and
so.
you also have, talented software developers who can actually come up with an idea and create something that just produces a whole new data set.
Mhm.
And in years before, it was very challenging. Like, in order for you to develop something, where did you put it? We didn't have an app store, right?
Mhm.
Now all of a sudden you create the iPhone or whatever.
Make it
And
accessible.
now we have app stores. So now we have coding languages. Now we have every human being who can code and come up with an idea, create an app, and guess what? They're all powered with data. So we're even generating more data than we can even, I mean, and what about the data we don't analyze and we don't store and it's lost? You know what I mean? So I just think we hear a lot about it because people have realized the power in understanding what that data does for them and the applications of it to change our lives or to change our processes or to enable our projects to be more successful. So it's not going anywhere.
You use the term data set. We've used that term data set. Now, when I was new, just kind of getting into really trying to get into data, I went out and grabbed a couple of data sets. These are just examples. One was the Titanic Data Set. You guys know what I'm talking about? It's listed the people who were on the Titanic. And doing that, I used an application called Jupyter Notebook and a few Python things. And I was able to based on a person's gender, based on a person's, how rich they were, based on where they were housed in the boat, right? You get to determine survivability and all that sort of thing. That's a data set. There's another data set called the iris data set, which is all the irises, I guess, that have been genetically modified or what have you like that. Now, I'm just throwing out a couple of examples. What are some examples of data sets that you all have worked with?
I mean, the census provides a great set of data to work with. You just have to be patient and willing to dig through it. And then again, like mentioned earlier, Kaggle has sample data sets and then some real data sets that they put out there for samples. Then you have other data practitioners who put out sample data sets. Like the Olympics has a fun data set that you can work with. The World Games, I think you could probably use a web scraper to scrape all that data. That's another thing too, like you don't have a data set, there's tools out there, you can get the data set as long as you're not breaking the rules and the terms of agreements. So yeah, and then I find there's a lot of value in if you're doing research level work where you're actually researching and you want to do statistics and significance testing, like the Pew Research has a lot of really great research data sets that are freely available, but they do come with a term. Like if you find something groundbreaking in those data sets, you are required to,
You have to
terms
share
of
it back.
agreements, you have to share it back with them. So yeah, there's so, I hate to say Google, practical data sets, Google large data sets, then it becomes, you need to know which tool set you're going to use, right? I also, like you mentioned Jupyter Notebooks, and that's okay, like I love it. Not everybody's using Python.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, you don't
So
have to use.
that's another challenge I face all the time. And Nathan and I were talking about this earlier. I had another national vendor come to me and ask me if data is so prolific, why are people not pursuing it? And I'm like, because you're starting everybody at R, so you can't do that.
Which is a language.
Yeah, it's a language. It's a coding language, and it's the same reason why we have. Like, why don't we have enough coders in the world? Well, because they go into programming class one day and they hate it and then they leave. So we already know that about coding in the coding domain. So why are we doing it in the data domain, right? So I just thought I would just throw that out there for those.
I'm glad you brought that up because there's
Yeah.
so many people like, well, I'm not a programming genius, therefore I can't do data.
Right, wrong. But unequivocally wrong. You mean you're not going to grow up and be a data scientist probably, because data scientists code. But that does not mean you can't have a very active, amazing career in data. Like, so again. I just
Well, let's
have to
bring up
throw
that distinction. Too often I've seen people, not pros, but I've seen people say, oh yeah, I'm going to become a data scientist. And I'm like, well, do you want to be a data analyst or a data scientist? Because those are two different things, right?
Very distinct. Very distinct.
And we need more data analysts, and it takes, I would argue, there's less barriers to entry to becoming a data analyst than a
Agreed.
data scientist.
Yeah, I was a part of a team of about 150 people, and we had 2 data scientists on that team.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to be either one of them.
They probably didn't want to be
But
either.
I was always the guy that helped them extract what they needed and then
Yes.
arrange it, right?
So you were the data
going back,
analyst.
right? I was the analyst.
Or
and-
the engineer.
or the engineer. How are we going to extract that? Where's it coming from? How are we going to represent it? And then the other the evil word for data is metrics. Nobody wants to hear that. Where are my metrics? I'm like, metrics on what? What are you collecting
Yeah,
on?
yeah.
So just tell me what you want to collect on. I'll build the data set for you.
Yeah.
And go from there. So going back to what data sets have I used, the ones that I created out of the work that we were doing, of course, and we were looking at that, either indicators of compromise, known behaviors, or the baseline, okay? When you're baseline in networks, and applications, you're looking at, what are the methods of communications that are normal between these two entities within your organization? Okay, normalize the communications, normalize the application outputs to wherever they're supposed to go, and then look for the abnormal. It's like the picture with the cars and the bikes, right? The bikes were going one way, the cars are going the
Yeah,
other.
right.
Why? That's the first thing that I asked, right? What? So maybe they just wanted to go that way. I don't know. Bikes are going downtown, cars are going uptown. So who knows? But you have to ask your leadership. What? I guess going back to the military terms, what are your mission goals? And then how do I make the data represent what your mission goals are? Maybe you're not collecting enough points. So the original arrangement of it all might have been, like that null value.
Yeah.
It could be not just one value. It could be gap, in
Huge
big
gaps.
data set or big subset of the data, right?
Yes.
Going back to why did I take statistics? Because it was part of my degree program. Did I like it? No, but I learned how to manipulate data from taking that course, right?
Yeah.
What do you guys say then that like a data analyst could play in a user interface all day long, never touch an architecture? Would that be a fair statement?
I think
Oh,
that's
yeah.
I mean, I think it depends. Okay, well, first of all, I think it depends on the definition of that organization's role for a data analyst, right? Because they may actually have a data engineer on their hand, but they're calling them data analysts, or they're not calling them anything. They're calling them operations or logistics.
Right.
Who cares? I think ultimately we have to understand that there are different roles in data. They require different skill sets depending on where you're at. But if you pursue data analysis and you do, you may be a data analyst forever, or you may realize, wait, I've got an engineering aptitude. Like, I really want to pursue machine learning. I want to go into AI. Or you'll be like, I never want to do that ever again. Like, I don't want to do that again. And then when you think about the roles, to your point of working with 150 people and 2 data scientists, as a company, ThinkData said, hey, we could focus on data scientists, but there's like 2 of them in each organization. Or we could focus on data analysts, where there are many, and we can't have enough. And what we find in working with organizations is they sometimes believe we're going to hire a data scientist and we're going to solve all our problems. And the data scientist shows up and says, where is everybody else? I can't do data science if I don't have the engineers.
Yeah, properly
and I
represented,
don't have
collected.
the analysts, and
Yeah.
where's just the regular data person? And I think, I'm going to speak that message until I'm heard loud and clear, but I think that's part of our problem. So,
I feel like 15 years ago, that would have been answered differently.
yeah.
Whereas the data person would have to have done most of that.
Yes.
Whereas now I feel like, there's so much data, we don't have time and effort to analyze it. We need more analysts.
Yeah, so are they going to come pull you off your role to do something that someone who's lesser skilled but still skilled could do? Right? They're not going to take you away from your everyday where you're just a critical role. Or unfortunately, they will do that. They'll go task this person who's already overwhelmed, and then they can't verify.
Are you collecting data on
validate.
that? Are you collecting the time wasted on that? Just wondering. Because then you
It's
might
a
need
lot.
another FTE to fill that
Yes.
position?
And 15 years ago, if we found something interesting in the data, they'd say, awesome. But that was it. Like now there's expectations that awesome does happen.
Yes.
And that's the difference, where analysts do have expectations to them, as opposed to, oh, that was awesome.
No, no,
Go find something else.
That's right.
Point,
That's right.
point out
So-
something. I'm gonna make a point.
Sam,
Point
go
out
ahead.
something. So, in my AT&T days, we hired UPS to help us streamline our operations because UPS has it down. They created a whole separate company on data collection and improvement and tasks and on time watch. Stop. They started that in the 70s. Okay, and
I'm glad
they got it
keep
from
your-
IBM.
Keep your thought, because I'm glad
Yeah.
you brought that up. I was talking to a UPS
Yeah.
person at one of our corporate roundtables
Yeah.
that we often
Yeah.
have at CompTIA, and he was saying they realized at UPS that they were in many ways in the data collection
They
business
built a
more than the
product and
delivery
sold
business.
it, and they sell it to other companies. So then they sold it to AT&T. They sold the whole process to us. They came out and trained us how to do it, and then we started riding with our technicians. And the next thing you know, the whole process on down to the screw, right? Driving a screw to mount the box on the side of the house. How long does that take? Do they have the right tool? No, he was using a hand screwdriver instead of the drill we gave him. Why? Is it a break in the procedure that they didn't learn it properly? All that goes into that. And you got a guy that's out there with the technician that was riding around with a clipboard, just collecting, not asking any questions, just collecting.
Just watching.
Yeah, and collecting.
now
And
we
then
have-
all that data set came together, and that's where we got this is how you do your job more efficiently and save time and money, right, for the
This is
company.
why I could care less if you could code.
Right.
Because can you look?
Yeah.
Can you look at what you're seeing there?
Mm-hmm.
And can you make an informed decision that, hey, if I take this guy and I give him a different tool that costs just a little bit more money,
Save time.
but it's going to have this much time impact.
Yeah.
I mean, there is, again, back to our data example earlier, there is literally data and everything. I'll give one example of this. It's similar to that. First of all, we couldn't have UPS or FedEx if they didn't realize they were data companies a long time ago. So thankful for them for that. But I got to build a piece of software. I was really proud of it, and it was between HUD, the contract administrators, and the people who Section 8 housing. And went in there, and I was doing that. I had my little clipboard, and I was like interviewing all the people, and I'm like, okay. And I'm watching them. They have these mail runs, and they get up from their cube, they walk to the printer, they scan everything, they pull it down, and then they go back and they do their thing, and then they get up again. And I just calculated, I did a little spaghetti model of them all walking out of their cubes and put a time frame on it, and then calculated payroll for what they were paying people to walk to the printer multiple times a day, and said, why don't you just hire someone who delivers the mail to their cubes? And they were like, you can design this software. I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to design the software.
You worked yourself right into a
I
job.
worked myself right into a job. Like, I didn't even have to pitch. I mean, and it's
a
still
beautiful thing.
operational today. But yeah,
Yeah.
it just takes, like, we talk about data sets, and that's really important. I'm a big fan of data sets. You're going to see data sets all through Data Plus. But data is data. It is a living, breathing thing. You can watch it. You don't have to have a spreadsheet to capture it. You could just look at it, make a decision from it, and totally change the direction of something. It's hard for me not to geek out right now. I'm sorry.
So,
I'm losing my mind up here.
on the topic of data sets, like within the DoD, I feel like some of the biggest ones would be security of ourselves,
Yeah.
assessments of an adversary, and health and status of our applications. I think those are the three biggest ones I see. I don't know if there are so many jobs in those roles, and we just don't have enough. And it's to that point, like 15 years ago. 15 years, those jobs existed, and it was kind of like everyone was just playing with toys, and it was fun. But now there are expectations, like 24/7 shops. We need
There's deliverables.
0.99% availability of an
Yeah.
app. You know, like things like that if stuff happens, people get fired type of experience.
Or
And so-
die, in this case.
Or die,
Yeah.
right? I just heard a few
Right,
people
yeah,
saying that, yeah.
And you know, those data sets are, that we're already collecting them. We are constantly improving how we're collecting them, and we're getting more and more data from that. It's again, that's securing ourselves, checking out the adversary in some other way, and then mounting our apps.
You mentioned, Sam, Security Onion.
Sure.
Of those three categories, protecting ourselves, what was the second one?
Protecting ourselves, checking out the adversary, and then monitoring our apps.
Monitoring applications. What were you doing with the Security Onion? Did it fall into any one of those three buckets?
Right, monitoring the application. Sure,
Okay.
absolutely. Yep.
That's what I figured.
Yep.
So let me ask the next question. When it comes to, is there anything else about data sets that any of you wanted to bring up? Okay. We've heard about signal intelligence for a lot of time, SIGINT, right? In the military, right? And we've developed that for centuries, actually. So what does it mean from a signal intelligence perspective? What are you seeing in terms of data analytics performing that? Because we've talked about, for example, you mentioned, Sam, somebody actually going out and tracing a worker or monitoring a worker and all that. Nowadays, IoT can do a lot of those things, right? So from a great decisions perspective and a SIGINT perspective, how can data analysts help support them? We'll start with you.
Yeah, and I will, just differentiation, like there's many ways to hold data. And where I talk to, the people I talk to are in the search world. Search is data that doesn't change. Okay, that's a big difference, right? So there's a lot of data that's constantly going to change. It's constantly evolving. And search is not good at that, because search is all about, once the data is in the search tool, we want to build metadata on it, and we don't like that metadata changing, because then it messes with our search capabilities. So the ones I'm going to bring up are along those lines. I see geo is the big one in the SIGINT right now. And geo is in, we've had geo, but again, it's to that point of Moore's Law, we're having the ability to see a lot more geo stuff. And with machine learning that exists now, instead of one single person staring at a computer and watching that car go from point A to point B and vice versa, we can actually just put a geo-tracker on it, and then machine learning will let us know if that car leaves the normal route. Let us know. Let us be able to see what's happening from that perspective. And that's the only time we would have to look at it, is when it does this loop every single day. It does this loop every single day. This truck. If it goes over here, let me know. And until it goes over there, don't worry about it. So then we can look at thousands and thousands of trucks that way, much easier in that sense. So that machine learning has created the ability, and the Moore's Law, that combo has created the ability to see just astronomically more signals in that sense and see when things do stray from what is normal.
How close is AI coming to replacing a data analyst or a security worker or whatever? This is usually in the back of people's minds a lot. Sorry, I just came up with that out of the blue. So.
It's never come up ever.
I'm glad somebody said that, because we're often hear about, well, you know, you can get replaced by a web script, or we've seen automation replace jobs for centuries, right?
Yeah.
But so if you are advancing your skill set, I argue you're not going to get automated, is my usual argument.
It's right now it's single actions that can get machine learned. It's not a holistic approach.
Yeah.
Like that's how I look at it.
I mean,
Where-
it all comes down to trust. Do we trust it yet? And the answer is no, right? So especially in the military space, does the commander trust the AI to help him make that decision, or does he want it to come from a human analyst first? Okay, the AI spits out the data, the information, and then the human analyst either confirms, denies, or accepts it for what it is. And then he gives that commander that information based on his analysis of the AI-driven data, and then the commander makes his knowledgeable decision. And if it's a knowledgeable decision that saves lives, that's a good thing. If it ends up, going wrong, then there's going to be a, big lessons learned, or AAR, or hot wash, whatever you want to call it after that, for sure. And, did we document that we used AI-driven data or AI-presented data for that without proper human analysis? That's what it all comes down to. Do we trust it? And I don't know. I still don't think we trust it to that extent yet, right? Do we trust it with our lives yet? No. When
and
Arnold comes, I think, as the Terminator, 15? What movie are we up to, right? Then,
Terminator too many. If you ask
Right,
me.
yeah,
Terminator
right.
too.
Yeah.
That's funny.
So-
Well, I think there's a big question too to be answered around data ethics. Like, we don't talk about data ethics enough.
Well, yeah. And what we're collecting on and why.
What are we collecting? But also, like, Doug Rose is a friend and also worth a follow, and he talks about data ethics. And he's got a story about when they're programming autonomous cars. Like, your self-driving car is going to drive yourself around, and they have to tell it, like, okay, you're in an accident situation. What are you going to dodge? And they program the car to dodge the larger object and hit the smaller object. Well, okay, so don't hit the Mack truck, but
Least
hit the
damage,
kid on a
right?
bike.
Right. Yeah, that's
So
great.
until we have these ethics issues and how we resolve these issues, I think we can only go so far so fast. I think there are some benefits when you're dealing with petabytes of data. Like, you're not using Excel spreadsheets for that, people. I mean, you've got to have the proper tool for those types of data.
To get through that data.
To get through that data. And so, you don't have time to go through 1 billion records to make a decision. You need technology, whatever its name is, to go through those millions of records, billions of records, to help make a decent decision. So I don't believe it will replace a human. I think it will enable humans.
Right.
And I think it probably enables humans today, but there's just a big gray area there. And I get into the ethics part of it.
I've never thought about the ethics. That's an interesting point. I'm just thinking in my head, like, how many jobs has Alexa taken over at this point? And I think the answer is definitely 0.
Yeah, right.
Like,
How many jobs has it created?
yeah, how many jobs has it created?
Which is
Yeah.
more than 0.
And how long is it going to take from this day for a single job to be taken over by Alexa? And I think we're more than I can imagine years away
Yeah.
from that. So that's how I.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me stop here just for a second. Any questions that I could throw a microphone out in the audience with? If you do, just raise your hand and I'll. Oh, here we go. Go ahead and give us your name.
I'm Troy. Our business decision makers sometimes coming to a point where we have petabytes of data where the management and the storage cost to having that, where the answers that you get from analyzing data, yeah, it's nice and important, but sometimes the value of having that answers is no longer worth the storage cost.
That's interesting.
Yes.
It depends on the regulated environment too, how long you got to store it for. So going back to my finance days, some of that data in those transactions have to be stored for a long time. But then to your point, purging data and tech debt on top of that. So different platforms that you stored it on, are they compatible with today's environment that you're getting ready to migrate to? And do you have to move your storage from legacy storage that you had at a financial institution in the 1990s up to an Elastic Stack, for example? And then how do you do that without losing it? That's the other thing too. I think it's so important.
It's so true. Yeah, it happens all the time. We drop data on the floor all the time. We don't have a good solution. There's some really good discussions. Data mesh, we just talked about, I think has the potential to really move towards that, having the ability to archive data in a way that's easier to work with, even though it might be slower because it's archived, but still workable. Those concepts really have not existed. Like right now, I'll give it a good example. So we had the Log4j issue that happened last year, about 9 months ago. And I cannot tell you the amount of people we talk to who say, we ask them, okay, how long did it take you to see in your enterprise, in your environment, where it existed? And it was like nightmare story after nightmare story. They would have to go find some cargo of tape somewhere, bring it back, load up that tape, realize that wasn't the correct tape. They have to go back, get another one that was maybe half of the tape, find a way to bring that into their system. And it was just months of work just to look at 5 years worth of data. Even though it existed, it was just so far removed from usability. And we're building technologies, throughout the industry, we're building technologies to improve that. Because it's just expensive. You just can't put everything readily available all the time. But I'm guessing this time in 3 or 4 years, we're going to have better answers, and maybe 4 or 5 years we may actually have solutions that are doing it. But right now, it's not.
There's tools that depends on the size of the organization. I think financials are using several. I'm not going to name any vendors by name, but it's basically AI. Turn it loose on your network, but you have to tune it before you let it go. So you set your classification standards, and it's just rubbing and scrubbing through all your data stores, and it's slapping it with a classification on top of it, and then tagging it, and then giving you the suggestion that this is where this should be, and then you're looking at it going, wow, it's in that file, in that data store. Going back to who has access to that, right? And then start controlling your access. So your IAM, right, means a different thing in the commercial world, identity access management. We grew up in the Army, it was the information assurance manager, but now it's the identity access management team. And I wouldn't want to be the head of that team at any large financial institution either.
You mentioned the term, were you going to say something? No. You mentioned the term a couple of times now, tagging.
Yeah.
Data tagging and
Sure.
things like that. I remember talking with Bill Newhouse, works for NIST, and he's working on a project of data tagging. Is that because you want to be able to identify when information has been hacked or altered, or are you trying to tag the data so you can use it for better data sets? Clarify that.
A little bit of both, right? So I would almost go all the above, right? You want to tag it. Going back to that product that does that, there's a couple of them out there that identify it based on your classification. So you input it, and then you set it loose, and it's just kind of crawling through your network, and it's going to each one of your storages, and it's tagging it and arranging it. So then you can go back and look at where it's at in whatever classification model that you set up. And then does it have PII, PHI? Does it have transactional
So
information? Is it a
it'll
photograph?
crawl through and
It's
find
crawling
it.
through your whole network, everything, all your stores, and it's doing that for you. And then you identify, should it be here? Because if you have employees over the years, remember all the NAS shares we had and all
Yeah.
the shared folders we had over the years, and then we had SharePoint, and now we have Teams that's just SharePoint on, or something on
with an
top of
interface?
SharePoint,
Yeah,
right? So we had and everybody was working on all these projects, and they all wanted to get their project out the door on time. So what did they do? They cut some corners without knowing it. So going back to that unwitting insider threat, so the loss of positive control, possibly, if you've got, spreadsheets of PII that was left over from a project that was going on 5 years ago in this file folder, and you have employees that shouldn't have access to it, but they do, then is that reportable? I mean, that's something you have to make an internal decision on, but is it? Right, and going back to the military, the DoD, is it mission-related information that's in the wrong file share because it was something that was there 4 years ago? Yeah, he's laughing because he probably experienced it, right?
I've probably gotten social security numbers from God knows how many people.
Right.
You're saying you got,
creating CDs because they were in a file.
Sure.
In the early years.
so you're saying you got social security numbers from many different things. Stephen and I had a bit of an adventure with social security numbers getting onto a base
Right.
next week in Tucson. Maybe you didn't, but it was interesting trying
Right,
to
and
get
then
that
you go back to
information.
all the breach notifications laws now, the GDPR, and now every state has their own, and so yeah.
So it's not all about, we're gonna have a prettier data set that we can visualize with this class of data. We have to cover, because we're under regulation.
Yep,
if
the
you have
governance
this
piece.
data, you're not allowed to have it. GDPR, like, the United States is not quite there yet.
Yeah.
And luckily for all the corporations in the United States, they're not, because again, that exact thing, if you're collecting information on someone and you have to wipe that information out on a person by person request, talk about technical overhead, technical debt, oof, that's a lot. So yeah, get your data classed.
So if you
now.
look at the California law and the requirements there, even if you're the federal government and you lose that record, and
You're busted.
that person's a citizen of California, guess what? You're supposed to report it.
Right. It's yeah. It's an interesting time in the
Yeah.
world. I also think it makes the case for, we have different data professionals for different data reasons,
True.
doing different data things, and we do not need to do the whole thing we did with technical people in the early days, which is, oh, you're in IT, you know everything.
Yeah.
You are a catch-all, you know all things, because we all know, like, you have to find your specialty, you have to find where you fit, you have to find how your brain works, and then be in that. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting, we talk
Wow.
about data analysis,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah.
visualization and data mining and all that, but what we're talking about right now, totally different level of data, even though there's crossover there.
So you mean that only happens in IT, the IT world?
Yeah.
Say that
So
again,
we
Sam.
talk about data classification in Data Plus, right? But the data analyst is not responsible. In most cases, they're seen as business intelligence people. They're not responsible under
Governance
the
is-
same rule as the technical people who are supposed to be protecting PII. So that's what I mean. Like, you might have an analyst go class information, but it's the IT department that's ultimately or
Usually,
it's a
I would say
technical
governance.
department.
Governance. So
Yeah.
governance, along with your legal team, is responsible for developing that classification guide. I mean, who owns the DoD classification guide?
Yeah.
Right? Not the
No.
communications people.
No.
No. Right? Leadership does. So.
But then they might very well have a data analyst if they're not using the AI tool to go
Right.
look.
Yeah.
They're going in and looking, writing queries and looking for that data. So I just think it's interesting that
Yeah,
we're
you get
again
trained as
talking about.
anybody in here got trained as a disclosure officer, a foreign disclosure
We have a disclosure officer,
Okay.
1, 2,
Yeah.
3, 4.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that was one of the greatest courses I didn't want to be in.
There are so many job roles. Now, we have mentioned, for example, data analytics and security, but there's so many different job roles that use data analytics, and it won't even have the word analyst in it. Is that
No.
fair enough to say?
Oh, absolutely.
What kind, any examples you care to talk about?
Foreign disclosure officer.
Okay. All
Just list out a job title.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, it's found
Throw them
everywhere.
out, it's
Good-
everywhere.
Yeah, Nathan?
Yeah, so, go
I
ahead.
mean, one thing I see is like if there's an executive, they will probably have a data analyst for their work. Like, you know, for instance, so I'm in a product company. We sell products, right? And most of the executives will have a data analyst assessing how their business is doing from a sales perspective. And so that's literally their job, is assessing the sales within the federal team, within all those different, within a product sector, and seeing what is working, what's not working, why is it not working, what issues in the product need to be improved. I mean, all of those data sets that they're building, and those data analysts are experts at tech product, making sure that tech product is improving and that the ecosystem around that product is what the customers want. as
Yeah,
well.
absolutely. I mean,
So, yeah.
if you put it into military terms, if you look at I would say a battalion level is probably something good to look at. Starting there with the staff augmentation to a battalion, each data set is there for the 2, the 1, the 3, the 4, and the 6, and all that gets rolled up to like the XO or the chief of staff level, and then the commander has all of that data making his decision, you know, based on when are my people going to eat? Well, the 4 knows that. Where's their where are they going to sleep? Well, the 4 knows that. How are they going to communicate? Well, the 6 knows that. Well, how are they going to operate? Well, the 3 knows that. And then, how are we going to write the awards for this event? Well, the 1 knows that. And those are all those data sets that are coming up to that command level, and he's going to make that decision. So if you really look at the leadership, the commander is a data analyst, right? In the end,
It has
right?
to be.
Absolutely.
That person,
But then each one of those staff augmentee groups has a senior data analyst, which is the 3, the 6, the 4, the actual, right? You guys know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
The military
I think
background.
that's a good way of putting it. Like, every executive on planet Earth will make decisions.
Mhm.
The question is, how much data will they have to make that decision?
Correct.
Yes.
And I think that's why they put that data analyst there, so that they have as much data as possible when they make that decision.
Yeah.
Right.
You hope. You do have to understand though, when you have, so regulated industry is a little bit different than non-regulated private industry. Tech companies versus non-tech companies, right? So a data analyst inside a technical company like yours is a totally different type of data analyst than one working in a business
Right.
unit in a bank. It's just different, unless that's the data analysis department inside the bank. Again, that is yet another type of data analysts. And there's commonality in skills across the board, but they are very vastly different types of roles and skills requirements depending on where you're at and what you're doing.
Well, let me see, or stop here because we're getting near the end of our time, right? A couple minutes left. Anybody have any questions, any online questions, et cetera? To finish up, final thoughts from the three of you, Sam, Nathan, and Robin, concerning data.
I think it's almost time to collect Miller time, so that's a collection, right? That's a data set, a 6-pack. Yeah, right. Oh, I thought this was a great panel. I'm, happy to be here, and I think that the Data Plus certification and the training that people are going to get out of that's, something that if you're thinking about it, move towards it, right? So look for ways to do it.
Thanks, Sam. Appreciate it.
I guess my final thoughts were like Sam, this was great. I really enjoyed having the different varied experiences here. I just want to encourage people to, again, pursue data education. And whether you become a data analyst, you do Data Plus, or I care less. What you really want to be is data literate, and then you want to also move to data fluency. You need to know what you're looking at, and you need to know how to work with it. And I don't really care what skills you need to gain in order to do that in your domain. But if you're looking for anything, more literacy and more data fluency would be my final. And yes, of course, obviously take Data Plus certifications. And I hope you enjoy the book.
I would say it's a worthwhile place. Like, I feel like I have made a difference in this world through data. And I'll give a couple of quick examples. So I was monitoring a lot of applications back at, we'll just over at the NSA, there was a huge issue, huge outage that occurred, and I was the reason that we fixed that issue because of data analysts being able to assess that analytics. Went through the roadshow, talked to a whole bunch of brass for a few days after that, talking about how I did it. I saved a guy's life. So there was an executive that the extraction process of the data, it was messed up. And I realized that, I changed that process, and almost instantly we saw exactly what we needed to do to save this executive's life. So like, major impact because of data. It's geeky. It is so geeky. It could be interesting if you just say in an analyst world and you just look at like UI, it could be less geeky. But you know, it's a world that has so much potential to make a difference. And just keep that in mind. It's a really great place to
I
be.
think when you're making a change to the world, it's always at a point where you're getting geeky. It's kind of how I feel about
It's hard
that.
not to geek out on that.
Well, thank you so much. I'm going to turn the time. Thank you, the three of you. Give these three workers a great big hand. Thank you. It's great to see people who work for a living talk about what their living is. So it's fantastic. Turn the time over to you, John. We've got a raffle, right?
Well, thank you, James. That was absolutely terrific. And again, thank you so much to Sam, Robin, Nathan, and James for coming in here and walking us through all things data today. A couple of housekeeping things as we wrap up. If you are leaving and you want to make sure you get your CEUs, please scan your badge at the back. And also we had a couple of free test voucher winners. I'd like to announce those right now. Our online community, which was very robust for this session. Our winner is Sherry Sakamoto from California. So congratulations, Sherry. You're receiving via email from Jackie back in the room back there, all of your instructions on how to redeem your voucher, and that will be coming to you soon. And then we have an in-person winner here as well, is Joshua Norwich in the room. Joshua,
Hey, there you go.
Congratulations. CompTIA will be providing you a free test voucher. We hope you'll use it for Data Plus and get yourself certified and validate the knowledge around this exciting data field.
So we have a Californian, and Josh, where are you from?
Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania.
All right.
So both sides of the coast, I'll call that. So there we go. We got them all covered. So John, thank you so much. Everybody, all the best. We'll see you on the next time online and in person. Take care, everyone. What?
All right, that was fun. Enjoyed that.
You going to Hawaii for the next?
Our Elastic will be there, so we can definitely. Yeah, it's me or someone else.
I'm John. I need to meet you.
Hey, let's go. I'll do it.
Thank you so much, man.
That was enjoyable. Thank you. I appreciate it. Hey, it was really nice to meet you. Thank you so much. Learned a lot. Yes.
The reason I ask is I'm sort of quasi-working for the signal.
Okay.
They're transitioning to 26 Bravos, which is much like
Okay.
information systems engineer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Let me give you my
And
card.
so they're trying to figure out what we need in the curriculum. It's a work in progress. We're working on it. And my boss, everybody is working on that.
Stephen, thank you so much. I forgot to thank you online. Yeah, well, exactly. Don't push the button on us. Did you find that blog I was telling you about? No? You can Google it. You're right, I need to put that up there.
need a scan, ma'am, do you need a scan?
He's there. Do you see on your CD notes?
Do I need some? I'll probably do at some point, Nina. Okay.
Rob is, we have to take plus certification. I just want the numbers to go up, so AFCEA is happy. Yeah, I did get it. I'm out of here. All right, I'm going with you. All right, all right.
James Title 8.
Because it was coming here. I couldn't catch the names.
Good job, Jackie. Good vibes and